Okay, folks, well, here we are. Uh, I'm the emergency coordinator for the Ramona area. Uh, Became a ham in the 1950s. Some of you may remember Allied catalogs and when you actually got to build your own gear, wind your own coils. But most recently, the last decade or so, I've been up in Ramona and playing with the unique things that I thought the Ramona Club needed. So we'll talk about that. I've got generally 5 topics. I'll give you a little background on the roars, the Ramona Outback Amateur Radio Society's characteristics. Uh, Talk about how we saw ourselves fitting into the world of emergencies, kind of taking a scorecard on our assets or our challenges, what makes us unique and how we had to work around that. And then finally working through how we deal with all that, the tools, the training, the community we work with. And at the end, I'll give you a little scorecard about where we think we are and what's left to do. So like most clubs, we're a 501c3, covering the back country, kind of always focused on emergency communications. I have to say that our club logo there is not really an outhouse. It's a well house from one of our early members. The fact that there's a little half moon on the door, you got to ignore that. So the interesting part of roars begins when big roars began. Back in 1989, the Ramona Water District actually contracts with the fire department, so the two of them are joined at the hips to provide fire protection and other emergency protections. And they had a concern back in 1989 that Ramona was isolated enough that they couldn't rely on outside assistance and communications would be limited. And in that discussion, the fire chief had actually come from Florida, where he had worked with the local ham radio clubs down there. And he suggested that Ramona give that a try. Thumbs were up on that. ARRL got mailing labels, and Harry's section manager Art Smith, I don't know if anybody remembers him, I never knew him, provided technical assistance to get roars started. So there we go, 1990 first meeting, 42 hams, and that's where it all started with an EOM-COM focus. So we're 32 years later now, and what's changed? Not a whole lot. Roars has up and downs, but today we're doing well as a pretty vibrant club, growing 60 plus members. Ramona is still an easily isolated area. Roars continues to focus on emergency comm. We have found in doing that we have excellent radio coverage north, east, and south from where we are, but we can't talk very well to the west. Mount Soledad or Mount Woodson gets in our way. So that's the big picture is that 32 years, life didn't change much. Second issue is knowing that, then how do we fit into the emergency world? It's a challenge. If you walk into a room full of all the people, the agencies, the processes, the documentation, I know when I started looking at this, I was overwhelmed by all the different things that roars might want to touch or engage with. So that alone was a challenge and a never-ending challenge because things are always changing. But what we concluded was pretty simple. Roar's best fits is Aries within the emergency communications plan for San Diego. We know the right frequencies to use and stay away from and contacts, and dealing with Aries is kind of our single focus outside of Ramona. I've got 2 shaded areas here, the auxiliary communication service for the sheriff and the Ramona CERT. Some of our members are in CERT, so we coordinate with those, but we don't find many synergistic activities. The sheriff's communication service actually doesn't seem to be too much interested in having a relationship with the club. If you want to join them and sit in their trailer, that's one thing, but as an outside connection point, it hasn't worked well. But those seem to be the only other 2 that we might spend more time with. And then having decided how we fit in emergencies, what makes us unique? The first thing is population and isolation. 3+4 million people in greater San Diego. We have about 1% of that looking east in Ramona. And those 1% of the population are scattered all over the place. We're isolated. Our challenges tend to be different than San Diego. So kind of bluntly stated, we don't interact much with what happens in the real world, and the real world isn't too concerned about Ramona. So we feel like we have to kind of take care of ourselves. Ourself is spread all over the place. 60+ members spread all over the back country. Has an hour drive to get from one end to the other. 4,000 foot of elevation differences across that. All kinds of terrain that restricts where you can go. And if there are fires or floods or whatever, we're kind of exposed to all of it. A fire could get here very quickly because we have all the combustible terrain. So a huge footprint to deal with for the Roars Club members only. The geography here, amazingly varied. It's beautiful to look at it. When the big fires that come through, however, they happen quickly, and if the winds are doing the wrong thing, we're right in the valley. The Santa Ana's get right through here. It could be 1 or 2 hours and gee, it's smoky to, oh my God, we've got to escape. And of course, if there were something like earthquakes, those give no warning. You can just be instantly trapped. And I didn't mention flooding, but a lot of heavy rains like we're going to get, they tend to put avalanches, rocks on the roads and so forth. So getting out of here quickly is a challenge. And more than that, then we become a choke point. All the back country has to come through Ramona to get down to the real world. So generally the terrain, the roads and everything make us very unique. Stated more bluntly, Ramona is listed as one of the worst towns in California to escape from. I've been told that it can take up, if you wanted to evacuate everybody from Ramona, it could take 11 hours under good conditions. We've only got 4 roads getting out of here. Most of them are windy, subject to avalanches, rocks, or they go through heavily wooded areas where a fire would shut the road down. And some of the roads go east, which is where you don't want to go. So bottom line is you don't have many ways to get out of Ramona. And doesn't mean there's much way for emergency responders and supplies to get up the hill either. So our culture up here is largely, we think we've got to take care of ourselves. We can't go down, others can't get up, and it might go on for hours, days, or even weeks. Largely the same issue with communications. You would think that with the huge repeater complexes we have on all over high mountains, it would be easy to talk everywhere, but even the 6,000 foot repeaters in Palomar don't cover all of our Roars footprint. And having been through a couple of emergencies up here, the popular repeaters in the big mountains, they get swamped. And for us to conduct regular traffic about what Roars needs is impossible. I would think the same as for cell sites, even if they're still up, there's so many people trying to call that the popular things we use all the time become almost useless. So, and also the heavy traffic runs the batteries down quickly on repeaters. So having worried about that a lot, we took the trouble to establish our own local repeater system, not something intended for use anywhere except outside or within the Ramona footprint. We have some advantages. Part of it is kind of what I've been talking about. We worry about this more than most people around San Diego do. So we give a lot of thought. We found that having established our own communication system is very, very useful to us because it's a quiet zone. Most people can't get in to use it, so a repeater doesn't become swamped, the batteries don't become run down. Very happy with our local repeater coverage. We also host the CAL FIRE attack base, so at least for local fires, we have the guys with the big toys here really close. A couple of pictures here, one of a severe rainstorm, one of a fire starting, both in the morning. Both those pictures were taken from my backyard. So there are real events here that impact us. So what do we do to try to be ready for this? We encourage all of our membership, whatever the radios are, to be powered by battery, generator, or solar. We don't want somebody to be down with the first power failure. So virtually the entire club is capable to operate, communicate for long-term emergencies, maybe indefinitely. We have repeaters both in the Ramona Valley and up in Julian. Between the two of those, we can cover everything that we want. I mentioned that the low valley repeater is only 1,400 feet and largely surrounded by the mountains around San Diego. So it's almost our own private communication system. And then we went further. We built our own communication system on a tandem axle trailer, completely self-contained. Everything you need to go get on the air very quickly. That's what it looks like in terms of what's on board and what is erected. You can see that it's got everything, not just radios, batteries, and solar panels. We got the tables, we have tents, we have ropes. So if you put that on the truck and take it somewhere, you don't have anything else to bring along to be on the air. I had to add a little footnote to this thing. We had two VHF radios in this, but when our president died half a year ago, and he was storing the trailer, and in all the commotion, those two radios got stolen. So at the moment, we're supplying club or member radios to get on the air. If anybody knows of any good deals in used VHF radios, we'd be interested in talking about it, because we'd like to replace those. We want everything on the trailer all the time. Next thing we do is we practice specific communications coverage tests. So this was a spreadsheet we used for a 2021 test. And the column here with the name and priority, we basically put our members at every CAL FIRE station in the Ramona footprint and at the likely staging areas where people would try to escape the fire or load their horses or whatever. So the question is, could we talk between all the fire stations and all the staging areas, and could we do it both on simplex and with repeaters? And went through the whole test, everybody talking about their signal strengths. And we spent several hours doing this thing with people in all the right locations. We found that at 1,400 feet, we get great coverage to almost everything, except where the star is. The CAL FIRE 86 on Mount Woodson along 67. That guy is in a communications hole. Even if you have one of our members sitting right there, there's only one or other two people he can talk to. So bottom line is we do a lot of coverage testing, fire stations, coverage between here and Julian, into the estates. Once or twice a year, we try to figure out if we really understand where we can and cannot talk. This is something all of you can access, but we have all these links on our website so our members can instantly pick up webcams. And it's amazing. Once again, we have so many high mountains around here that now almost every one of them has a webcam on top of it. So if you pick the ones you want, you can easily see what's happening in the backcountry. We can see smoke, fire, anything that's coming our direction long before it gets here. So again, it's not unique to us, but I encourage everybody to know what webcams are available, particularly the last two, the SDG&E wildfire cameras that actually have azimuth control by SDG&E, so you can triangulate on a fire. And then UCSD has webcams all around Southern California. So that's a It greatly expands your situational awareness. Communications, if things go wrong, how do you get hold of all your members? Not everybody's on the air. You're not going to spend 2 hours trying to call everybody. A few years ago, we picked up a program called the Ham Club Online, and it's to manage your membership dues and all these kinds of routine things, but it has a very unique tool in that you can send an instant message out to all your members' cell phones with a voice or a text message that you've got pre-canned. So in about 60 seconds, I can send out a simple message like the top one, a test message. This is only a test, but more importantly, I can send out the level 5 activation. In 60 seconds, I can tell every club member to come up on the air and what repeater, what frequency to come up on. So it allows us to be very responsive. Next, we kind of move on, what do we do outside our own club culture? We spend a lot of time trying to make the community aware of what we are doing, what we're capable of. We meet with a lot of organizations, give presentations. Our website, which is open to the public, contains a lot of the information I've been talking about here, so people can see what kind of disasters they are and what roads they should use. And we practice regular nets so that everybody's comfortable using the assets that we have. So we work hard to touch the world outside the 60 plus Roars members. This is one result. This is a pamphlet that's posted many places around San Diego. We don't build this. It's a Ramona community paper, but you can see that both ARRL and Roars are prominent on there in terms of available to help in the fire or disaster. So kind of a scorecard is, does the community recognize that we exist and we're available? We do conduct our own nets 2 or 3 times a month. The difference between our nets and most is that we rotate through typically 3 different levels of communications, each one increasingly difficult. We'll start with the high repeaters on Palomar with a big footprint and practice the net there if we had to talk to the outside world. Then we'll drop down to the Ramona 1400-foot repeater and just talk within the community. And then we'll drop off of repeaters and talk simplex amongst all of our members. So if the repeaters fail, we can still get the job done. Point is, this is routinely practiced every other week. We get on the air and we do that. And as a part of that, the net control responsibility, we try to rotate that through all of our membership, because who knows who's going to be in town and at the radio when something happens. So for all of our members and the public, all of the scripts and log sheets that we use to manage an emergency net are on our website. An example, a couple of pages of the kind of things that we have there. If you're an experienced net control operator, you don't need any of this, but we're talking about bringing people online for the first time. So we try to give them simple steps of what you need to do. Keep it simple, not too confusing. So there's a quick start guide. And beyond that, we move into perhaps a typical example of what you might want to do. Bring the net alive. What are the frequencies? We predefined a handful of frequencies that work for our area. So we got those listed. We practiced going through those frequencies in our net. And then an example emergency, what might happen if there was an earthquake in Shelter Valley. It's interesting that a net control right here, and hopefully with a backup, could talk to our members in Ranchita. They talk over the mountains. They can talk down in the Shelter Valley or under Borrego. So our footprint or our ability to connect communications goes well beyond just our Roars footprint. We can get outside of the world as well. So we've got people predefined. Some people monitor all of the government traffic. Net control might send somebody to the first responder staging area, etc. So simple guidelines to make it easy to get on the air when things are already confusing. Of course, we all do training at field day. So we bring our trailer out and do field day operations, but this is, as it should be, perfect emergency training. Everything we have at field day is battery or solar powered, even the lights hanging in the tents, so forth. We're 100% isolated. The trailer's got 3 different kinds of VHF, or 3 different kinds of HF antennas: a tower, vertical, dipole, and UHF, VHF, and even SATCOM. So we try to be very determined to use field day to act like we had to have a real emergency capability. I talked about touching the community. Here's kind of a checkerboard of the things that we do, the people we talk to. Work closely with the Ramona Fire Safe Council because they kind of lead the community preparation plans. We work at the Ramona Airport on their open house, so they know about us. Scouts Jamboree on the air. When we hold field day, we hold it just outside of Cal Fire Station. Invite the firefighters to come over and spend some time looking at what we do. So touching people frequently. Last year was a very special example of that. One of our members in schools, the Ramona Lutheran, got selected by amateur radio on the ISS, International Space Station. A very rare event to be selected for that. It only happens a few times a year for schools all over the country. So here in Ramona, we got students on the microphone talking to the astronaut as the ISS passed over. That was really a great event. And of course, we let everybody know that it was RARS that was putting this thing on. Last really unique asset is we all know about ARRL, but we actually have a small radio store in Ramona. Sell all kinds of commercial and amateur radio things, batteries, so forth. So in many cases, if we need something, we don't have to drive more than a few miles. It's got the coax, the connectors, the batteries, the radio. Very nice to have all-day electronics right here. Anybody wants to, they can drop on by anytime and see what they've got. It's in a house, and the house converted to be the business, just coming into Ramona. So the scorecard, what do we think we've accomplished? So all of these things, I think we've done a pretty good job at. Talked about all of them, the repeaters, the low level, the battery power, the trailer, practicing what we do. Top right, 14 trained net control operators. I think today we've got 16, and in 2023 we'll push that number higher. Okay, so we're pretty happy with having accomplished this. But did we do everything? These are the things I think are a challenge, and some of them I think are never going to be fixed. Obviously, the rugged terrain isn't going to change. We find that we have a lot of gaps in coverage in San Diego Country estates. So we got volunteers to act as repeaters, but giving some thought to putting another repeater in there, a permanent repeater somewhere. The estates are a challenge. Second, the customer. Cal Fire, the sheriff, unfortunately, I find they have little interest dealing with the amateur radio world. They all know we exist, but of course they've got their own communication system, their own priority, their own training. They don't want a bunch of civilians getting on their way. So there's actually not much ongoing discussion between them. We just kind of sit there waiting for the special circumstances where they might want to have us. Third button, participation. This is true for everybody. We only have about 10% of the ham assets involved in this. First part is because 2/3 of the licensed hams in Ramona, we've never seen them. They show up on the ARRL list, but they just never show up. And within the club, like most clubs, maybe a third of our membership is actually actively involved in doing this. So bottom line is, it would be great if you could expand the ham assets involved in what we're doing. We can be much more effective than we are. And lastly, our club is mostly senior folks that made their ham radio lives with normal VHF, UHF, HF radios. Not too much involvement in the modern digital world. This one we're having some progress on. We're getting more people involved in doing these kinds of things, but a little bit behind the 8 ball. So 4 challenges. I think only one of them can we move that rock on the road very much. So that's it. This is the sign you see when you leave Ramona. So I appreciate the chance to talk about what we do here.
Steve, thank you very much. Great presentation. And I would encourage anybody who is ever out and about on field day visiting sites to visit the Roars field day site in Ramona. It's right on Highway 67. As you pull into town, you come over Mount Woodson, drive down into town, and boom, there it is on the right. So a great easy visit on field day if you're out and about. So we'll take questions now for Steve. Raise your hand if you know how to do that. Or wave.
Well, I'll get started. I think Craig might have been in there for a second as well. One of the points that we always try to make to folks in this meeting, especially the folks that are new, we've got regional repeater systems. We've got repeaters that we post for adjacent areas. And we've got, a general repeater coverage map for Southern California available online in a variety of places, not just the ARRS resource plan itself, but other area maps. And I always encourage people to go out and, take some time. I hate using the term kerchunk because it's not considered very polite in the amateur radio world, but always kind of make the rounds with your gear, whether you're mobile or whether you're fixed at home, if you will, and see what machines you can make it into in your local area. And I will say to Steve, because he already knows this, I'm in the Kearney Mesa area, which is the far southwestern corner of Ramona. And I can make it into the Ramona machines without a problem from down here. And in most cases, I can make it to Steve when he's operating simplex and he's, not challenged by other stations that are a little bit closer. So when we have our event in January, it will be an opportunity to absolutely check out what you can do from your local location. Like I said, Kearney Mesa, it's not far, it's the southwest corner of Ramona, but Ramona is so big, I feel like I'm part of it. We can make it in there without a whole lot of issue, and I suspect quite a few folks probably as well can do so, but may not necessarily have tried or tried recently. And as Steve mentioned, it's a gigantic chunk of the community. I used to consider it the gateway to all things to the east of San Diego, because it really is. Shy of going out the I-8 El Centro corridor toward the desert, toward Yuma and things like that, Ramona is the other spot between basically the left coast and the rest of the continental United States. So it's kind of an important spot to be able to communicate with and through, as Steve pointed out. Other questions, perhaps?
Yeah. Hello. Steve and I met in 1964 when we were bench techs at Cubic. I went out and opened a radio shack and he stayed. It's very interesting because all you have to do is take Steve's presentation and search and replace Roars with Merck. That's the Mountain Empire Amateur Radio Club. And Ramona with the Real East County, and you have my presentation. Everything is exactly the same. We used to have real good cooperation with Cal Fire when I was on the Campo Volunteer Fire Department, but they did away with that when we got real firefighters out here. So yeah, very interesting. One thing we've done that has helped us with the population is we have East County Disaster Preparedness page. I've got 1,200 people on there now on Facebook, and we post weather and fire information on there. So a lot of our clearinghouse is through Facebook, and of course our hams. And yeah, great job, Steve. And we consider you a sister club.
Have similar problems, Craig. So I want you to be a guest speaker at one of our club meetings next year.
And both of you nailed it right on the head. I was not going to steal Steve's thunder because he's got the podium today, but Craig is in a very similar circumstance. I think the difference is that the population area for Ramona is slightly higher than Craig's neck of the woods. But if you put Craig in there along with Imperial, that's a little better balanced. I think that Ramona is probably still greater in population and regional space for the official incorporated / unincorporated area. And both of you gentlemen, I just learned something this morning. Thank you very much. You both worked at Cubic back when Ramona was a much smaller town. I think Cubic was probably the southwestern corner of Ramona. Not quite my area where I'm at regionally now. That was a good learn for me today. That's interesting. Very interesting. Any other questions or comments?
I'll just make the comment that I've watched what Craig built up in Campbell over many, many, many years. I think I have to give Craig credit for having encouraged me to do the same thing in Ramona.
You're too modest.
Back to you, Rob. I think we can probably look for any closing comments or thoughts and maybe get close to wrapping.
Certainly. So closing comments, other announcements, club announcements, anything that anybody would like to put out? No. Seeing none, Bruce, I think we have a wrap.
Very good, folks. Thank you for attending the December meeting. Again, look for announcements for the top of the year events, including the ARRL VHS, which we always try to dovetail with our local communication and simplex drill ourselves for not just areas, but the other teams and groups that support disaster communication. So it's not exclusively an ARRL event, also not exclusively an areas event. It is intended to go out and get people on the air, check their gear, try new things and technologies with VHF and UHF communications, which is 6 meters and up. And we'll also start the top of the year, as mentioned by Rob, with the EC roundtable and some other EC related planning, so we can get the areas alignment and game plans together for our events throughout next year in 2023. If there aren't any additional comments, and I'll throw it back to Rob in a second, I want to wish you all a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and safe travels if you are traveling, and if not traveling, just in general, be safe and healthy at home throughout the holiday season, and a Happy New Year. Rob, back to you.
Bruce, thank you. As Bruce was talking about, just a last minute comment on the VHF contest. San Diego has quite a reputation in Southern California during the VHF contest. We're very, very active, and many Los Angeles hams try to contact us down here to get the grid squares, and also because we have so many people in the air. And the mountain people working up in the mountains, rovers, really seek out the San Diego people, and they're so glad that so many San Diego people are in the air and active with that. Anything else, anybody? All right, that's a wrap. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll end the meeting.
73 all.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
73 all.